Good evening and welcome to Press Pass. This is going to be the Chinese edition. Just kidding. But yes, we're focusing on what you've heard in the highlights of most of the bulletins in town and on the papers. The talk in town has been Chinese businessmen taking over. Well, tonight we'll be asking this question.
Do you know the Chinese are here? And they
have infiltrated the retail markets, especially in Gikomba market.
And for several weeks now, Kenyans have vented on social media and the mainstream medias.
Is the talk of a Chinese takeover propaganda, or is there cause for concern?
The press has brought up what the Chinese are really doing.
Nani huyu Mkenya gani huyu anapatia watu ambao wanatoka China license kufanya kazi ya hawking?
And we'll get to everyday people views on what they think about the infiltration, the reported infiltration of the Chinese in small-scale businesses. So let's meet our panel that will be helping us understand the issues in this particular story and actually those who've reported on this from when it started. And next to me, Edwin Okoth. He has been here on the panel before talking about the SGR with SGR contract talk and what have you. And he seems to be a friend of Kenya and the Chinese as well, given his reportage. He is here. He's reported on this particular story for months now and has been following up. He is a business journalist at the Nation Media Group. You've seen some of his articles on the Business Daily and Daily Nation as well, and even the East African. Next to him is Julie Masiga. She is a commissioning editor at the Conversation Africa. You've seen also her columns on the Standard newspaper, where she's also worked formally, and of course, once a journalist, always a journalist, and also has some legal background. Perhaps we'll be lending some of that in the conversation today because there's immigration concerns about the Chinese who are working here. Next to her is Tony Watima, an economist as well as a contributor and columnist with the Business Daily. And they'll be contributing to this and more. Among them, the views from people around the country. In several counties, we've asked people whether they feel that there is cause for concern about the infiltration of the Chinese in small-scale businesses. This is what they had to say.
Imefikia paka wa China wanauza paka mahindi. Sisi tutauza nini? Tutachipigania na nini? Ukienda kwa samaki ni wa China. Wanaleta samaki kutoka China wanauza. Samaki imerudi bei ya chini. Sisi tunauza nini?
Kuna hawa Chinese wamejaa maeneo ya kila mahali Kenya. Tunaomba serikali itusaidie kwa ile kazi ambao wanastahili kufanya wakati ambao wako Kenya. Ikiwa wamekuja Kenya kwa kufanya kazi za ujenzi, tunashukuru. Lakini kuna kazi ambao mwananchi wa Kenya mdogo anastahili kuajiwa.
It is something that is urgent. The government need to take a quick action to ensure that they bring back the confidence of the citizen, because everyone, everywhere is getting concerned and things are getting out of hand.
Hawa watu wasiachiliwe kurandaranda kila mahali, watuharibie kazi yetu, maana hapa ndipo tegemeo letu.
Sema for example the Chinese wanyang'anye hizi permits za kazi ndogo ndogo, waachie Mkenya wa kawaida iweze kupata kazi, afanye apate riziki yake ya kila siku ili aweze kujiendeleza kimaisha.
Nimeghadhabishwa sana na haya maneno ya watu kutoka nchi za nje kukuja kufanya biashara ndogo ndogo hapa Kenya. Vijana wetu wengi hawana kazi, wamenyimwa licenses, na wakianza kufanya biashara ndogo ndogo wanasumbuliwa.
Press has brought up what the Chinese are really doing. We thought that the Chinese are coming to do some railway matters, road matters, but in the end, I don't know what has happened. Is it the government that has given the Chinese to do some business in Kenya?
Nataka niwape kongole sana wanahabari kwa jambo kama hili. Hatungejua kwamba kuna wa Chinese wanafanya hapa kazi, na vile vile kama wanafanya hapa kazi kwa njia moja ama nyingine inachangia nini uchumi wa Kenya kufanya nini kupanda juu, ama kwa njia nyingine inafanya nini inaharibu.
These are guys who are able to invest billions and millions of money in a business that we wakulima wadogo cannot even be able to put up 100,000 into. So the fact that the media is covering this and airing out these stories is just amazing.
Kupitia hiyo unajua sisi wa Kenya tutaweza kupata picha kamili ya Chinese wanafanya kazi gani. Unajua kama si media hakuna vile sisi wa Kenya tutapata hiyo hiyo picha kuweza kuelewa kwa kitu gani endelea katika Kenya.
Kwanza tuko na vijana wengi wana kazi na hiyo ni tegemeo lao na August wangefanya hiyo kazi. Sasa kama wazungu wamerudi kukuja kufanya kazi pande hii, wenyeji watafanya kazi gani? Na wazungu ndio tunategemea wanatuletea msaada.
Kama ingekuwa nyinyi kutueleza kwamba kuna strangers in the country in the name of hawkers ambao ni Chinese, ingawaje sura yao inajionyesha, lakini media mlisaidia sisi sana kuonyesha hizo mapicha. Thank you very much. May God help you.
Nani huyu Mkenya gani huyu anapatia watu ambao wanatoka China license kufanya kazi ya hawking? Kama ni minister ya serikali ya Kenya aondolewe saa hii kwa sababu anafanya kinyume. License ya watu kutoka nje haitakikani wapewe hata kazi kidogo kama ya hawkers.
The views from everyday people, the Wananchi, who feel most affected by this infiltration, reported infiltration. And Edwin, when you hear this, the concerns, you've done this story. In fact, it was published on the Business Daily, the Chinese in Gikomba, and this was published actually on the 10th, I believe, of this month. And there's been a lot of reaction to that following that particular report. We also saw what the CS did. The CS for Interior, he directed that those who are here illegally be deported. And we'll talk about whether the action has actually been taken. But from what you hear from the viewers, the consumers of this report, is there some form of misinterpretation of what you actually reported? Because it can take a life of its own. Have they understood the issues that you brought out in the report, and other media practitioners like Waihiga Mora of Citizen TV?
Yeah, well, to judge whether they understood what we reported on is not the real thing now, because these people understand from the field. The voices you hear here are the same voices in Gikomba and Nyamakima and Kamkunji. So it's a matter that was boiling, kept under some cover for a while, and there was no one to go and prompt them to say what they are saying now. So it's not that they didn't understand my report. I don't think they needed my report as much, because they are the people there and they know what's going on. The people who might not have understood what we wrote are the people who are tweeting other things, like probably believing that we are on some agenda to, paint some people in a different way.
Yes.
But if you talk to that man on the street, the person running the stall down the street, it's nothing new. They have seen it for a long time. It was only time that it was going to be told.
It was going to get out there. Julie, from what you hear and the people's voices, is there any form of disjointed understanding of what is happening? Perhaps there's also what people have been thinking, the perceptions that are now coming into play in terms of people's views on the Chinese.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with perception and how people have perceived the Chinese from the beginning.
Yes.
The whole loan issue, our country is being mortgaged, and now you hear this report where they're taking our jobs, quote unquote.
Yes.
And this is a global sentiment. That's why we have people like Donald J. Trump in office. That's why we have Brexit, because people are reacting to illegal immigration, sometimes even legal immigration, but people coming to their country and again, quote unquote, taking their jobs.
Yes.
If you look at the situation, these are people, they're hawkers. They are selling maize. They're controlling supply chains from supply to wholesale to retail, as Edwin wrote. So they would be a feeling that they're taking over and displacing Kenyans from jobs that they would have done otherwise.
Okay.
So while there's a lot of negative perception about the Chinese, I think this story raised all those passions to the surface.
Okay.
And then they're expressing them. But the danger would be that it can very quickly go from anger controlled, in a kind of controlled setting, to maybe attacks on Chinese nationals, because now you will see any Chinese person and assume that they're the people described in the reports.
Yes,
yeah?
they're here to take our jobs.
They're here to take our jobs. So
Yes.
I think the government clearly needs to step in and show that it's trying to protect local industry, trying to protect local jobs, and not let the people just interpret what they're seeing without any real information.
All right. As an economist, Tony Watima, is there anything peculiar with what's happening in our market here in Kenya in regards to the Chinese?
No, it's nothing in particular. That it's a global phenomenon, as Julie says. Chinese have controlled supply chains all over the world. You go to Canada, you go to US, you go to developed countries. Chinese have taken over the supply chains, and that's because China, for a period of time, established themselves as a workshop as an industrial workshop. So most of the people go for goods there and import to other countries. So they managed to take hold of the logistics part of the supply chain itself. So it's not something phenomenal that it's happening in Kenya. It happens everywhere. And so it depends on how a country and leaders try to direct that kind of a discussion. You see that what Donald Trump is doing in the US. So there are many ways on how people handle it. But I think we've handled it very poorly.
Right.
Yeah, because I think when you hear the sentiments that are being issued there, that people are taking away jobs and all that kind of a thing, it gives an impression that we are heading to a nationalist kind of an economic policy, and which is not right for an economy itself.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Just as we continue conversing on this, there's also another report that we all saw, and it was on Citizen TV by Wahiga Mora, who was actually invited and was willing to come on, except he's on air at the moment. So, and I believe you'll give your reactions to the piece that he put on. Very good sentiments to the work that was done over the last few weeks in investigating this particular issue. But Edwin, you've been investigating this before you even published, and we were in discussions about this for quite some time. What was the genesis of this story?
Yeah, the genesis of the story are the people affected.
Yes.
We've heard about it. You remember, this is a team. It's not just Edwin doing everything.
Of course.
There's the editor and there's a cameraman and there's a team.
Yes.
So we've heard that there are scuffles downtown involving a Chinese national. They're hawking electrical wires, and like any pessimistic person, like the way people dismiss stuff, we dismissed it for a while. And I thought, like Tony says, it's just a nationalistic kind of thinking, like that we are just lazy, we don't want to compete.
Yes.
So we went downtown. The first day we went to Kamkunji, we didn't find anyone. And they told us, you came at the wrong time.
You didn't find the Chinese?
Yeah, we didn't find the Chinese. So we were told, this is not the time. There is the time that you need to come. So the second day we went down again to Kamkunji and we found them. We went to the basements of those buildings, and we were very objective in approaching it, because we wanted to know, is it true that you're actually doing the retail? Because it's normal for importers, the big importers, to be the Chinese at some point because of the scale of capital required. So we were fine with that, but then we wanted to find out, is it really true that even in the lowest end of the chain, this business is going on? So yeah, we found 2, 3, and then the next day we went to Gikomba, and that's where now we found the real picture of what was going on.
Right. Is the concern here that there are many Chinese in this business, or that they're in a business that they're not allowed to based on their immigration status? What's the problem here?
The problem is the disruption of the value chain. It's like if I control everything, okay, and I'm more powerful than you, and this is where you've been for years, and then here I am. Let's put it very simple. You used to buy goods from that shop and then sell on this stall, okay? And then that shop now establishes a stall next to your stall, and then that shop now sells at half the price of your stall, or let's say cheaper than your stall. You're out of business, There's that respected normal chain of distribution that people are used to.
Okay.
But now when that is changing and they're watching as it changes, that is what probably brought them to complain or react.
Yes. But someone might say, actually, this is good for the market. This is good for the Kenyan who will end up buying the goods. No disregard to the interest of the Kenyan businessmen in Gikomba and other places, but it's good for the Kenyan who's going to go and buy at a cheaper rate.
In the short term, I'm not an economist, but it might be good. In the short term, it might be goods are cheaper. Some of them maybe last longer or not. China goods, you never know. But it might be in the short term. What about the long term? What about the long term for the Kenyan economy? Because the balance of trade and the balance of power between us and the Chinese is completely off. We import more from them than they do from us. They control big business like the SGR and now small business like hawking. So Kenyans are being pressed from all sides. So what is the solution to that? Is it to bring in like this mammoth business type conglomerate that controls everything, or create opportunities for local Kenyans, protect our markets, our local industries? Isn't that the better way to go? Because even the whole nature of Chinese involvement in Africa and in Kenya is very opaque. Even the loans, we don't understand how the loans are agreed, what the terms are. So we don't, even right now when we're seeing Chinese on our streets, we don't understand how or why. So this is a big part of the problem, is also the perception part.
Yeah.
But my parting shot would be that it seems like it seems to us, because we don't have the details, that they've been given free rein over so many things that affect our lives directly.
Okay.
Yes.
And it's parting shot. We're not ending the show.
Yeah, I don't know. On that issue.
And Tony, I'll get to you. But there's something he wants to interject.
Just to react to whether that is good for our economy.
Yes.
You know, at the end of the day, where does that money go to? You know, yes, we are buying cheap, and then, as she says, it might not last. But where does that money end up? You know, so in the long term, as she says, it's not a good thing.
Okay.
The person who was selling there before has a family that depends on her, pays school fees, pays rent, and interacts with so many other people within the economy.
Yes.
But when these goods come in, buy cheap, and then where does that money go back to? So follow the money and then judge whether that's good for our
whether it's good for our economy in the long run. And Tony Watima, someone might say, and I think this was a president who said once, willing buyer, willing seller. Yes. There's nothing there engaging in illegally. But there is a question about what kind of business they are meant to be in. And in fact, in his article, I think you put a figure of 10 million shillings in terms of what the kind of capital business that they're meant to get into. Yes, Kenya put the minimum threshold for foreign investor at 10 million shillings. And then you quote China Dubai Traders Group Chairman James Kariuki, who agreed that the law should make it harder for foreigners eyeing small-scale businesses that local business owners can do to enter in Kenya. So is a bone of contention here that the type of business they're doing doesn't require the 10 million shilling injection that they should, or threshold, just to help people understand?
Oh, okay. We are talking about the retail sector, which is quite fragmented from a regulation policy. You read that 2018 economic survey, it says that the Chinese, Mtumba, almost 60% of Mtumba come from China.
Yes.
And so these are people who see an opportunity that they can get to the wholesale and also the retail. You look at the licensing information where the state or government will come in. If you go to Gikomba, I'm sure it's only the county that licenses. National government has very little role to play in terms of regulation. So it becomes very difficult for the state itself as national government to know that a Chinese is doing this kind of a business at the stall next to you unless somebody reports it. Yeah. And so from a county perspective, if they license it, it means there's no problem.
Yes.
Talking about the 10 million licensing of businesses that are foreign, it happens mostly on the formal side. The retail almost falls on the informal side of the kind of the kind of thing that we're talking about today in the formal. The formal side it's very well implemented because you go through channels on how you register a company and such kind of a process. So government is able to intervene and make checks and balances on where you can meet that threshold. But coming to the point that about economic growth and the long term and the short term, I think there are two ways to look at it. First is that from a macroeconomic level, there is no problem with anyone doing business, whether it's a Chinese, whether it's a Congolese, whether it's a Kenyan.
Yes. Because
economic growth on a macro level looks at change of payment systems and exchange of goods. So it doesn't matter who was doing it. So on that level, there is no problem that there will be a problem within the economy.
On the level of Edwin saying follow the money?
It depends on where you're looking at, because if your government itself, you'll be giving yourself too much work in terms of how do you follow the money.
Okay.
Because it's not illicit financial flows that you will want to follow the money. It will be that you will want to set regulations that help the Kenyan trader. And so one of the main things will be that what are the proper channels that you establish business so government can monitor who exactly is doing business. And so for me, and the economics of it is that on the consumer side, a consumer will tell you for things that he's looking at is a fair price and the quality of it is good. So it wouldn't matter who exactly is buying from.
Yes.
From the government side, you're caught in a dilemma that you'll want to balance what is the interest of the Kenyan trader that might not be displaced, and what is the interest that you're attracting foreign investors in trying to establish themselves in helping in economic growth.
Right.
So it depends on what exactly you're looking at. Even when Edwin says that you follow the money, what exactly you're looking at and what are the kind of the regulations?
I think he was jotting down when you're talking about the responsibility of the county government and the national government. You were following this as well in terms of giving them the permission to exercise their business.
Yeah, and I wanted to interject before he said, like, I understand his economic perspective of it, but then there's the legal perspective of it. There's every economy has a way of protecting its little, entrepreneurs.
Yes.
So if you open and then say, okay, it's free for all, I'm not sure how far that can stretch. But then there's the investment, the Investment Promotion Act of 2004. It talks about the 10 million for a foreigner to come in and invest, so that you get an investment certificate. But it's not just 10 million and that's it. There's the other aspects that are aligned to that 10 million. I might read for you just two. Say, you need to create employment for Kenyans. The people we found in Gikomba are obviously not creating employment because, I mean, there's someone just recording that there's a bale leaving the basement and he's writing. No.
Okay. It's all Chinese.
Yes, that's you are not creating employment there. Then there's the part where you're required to create acquisition of new skills and technology. I doubt whether carrying bales in your shoulder creates any skills, or transferring technology to Kenyans, or utilizing local materials and
But at the level of business that we're talking about, the informal sector, are those demands or requirements that we could actually realistically expect?
But this is simply telling you that is not where we need a foreign investor to come in.
Okay.
That's the plain way of saying it. That unless you are bringing 1, 2, 3, 4 technology, employment, transfer of skills, then we probably don't need you there, because these guys can handle that.
Real quick, and then Julie, before we take a break.
I'm not saying that we should let it free for all. Many countries use different ways in terms of boosting your local traders. But the thing here is that when you look at from a government perspective, if you want to regulate such a thing in the informal sector itself, you can put those guidelines itself. And there are many guidelines in terms of establishing business in Kenya. Yes. But following it up through, it becomes very difficult, especially for national government, to come and intervene in such situations. Because Kenya's informal sector, and that's the thing about the nature about informal sector, it's very invisible. It's a shadow thing that you don't have a pulse as government to determine things the way you want it to be. And so it becomes a difficult position that if you're in government itself, it's a very difficult position to be in. So how do you intervene? Because from an economic perspective, despite the economic growth, the negative side of it, if you're looking at employment, you will see that there are people being displaced on the informal sector. So how do you intervene from that end? It becomes difficult because it's a shadow sector that you cannot intervene that much. Yes. So those are loopholes that such people will want to exploit. But it's something that it's an amorphous thing that government cannot really determine the direction that you want it to go.
Do you see anything wrong with us saying or insisting on that point where this is actually a sector where Kenyans can do this biashara and it doesn't have to be taken up by any foreigner in terms of the expectation and the notion it creates in the Kenyan?
Yeah, I think sitting in the middle, I'll take the middle ground, because economic analysis is very cold and faceless. And clearly the spirit of this Investment Act is to protect local people and local businesses. So you can't really claim that the government doesn't know what's happening on River Road, wherever it is. They do know what's happening. And this is the problem. There's something broken in our system. We can't be sitting here and imagining that there are Chinese people hawking and taking very basic jobs that Kenyans could do, and the government is unaware. In my opinion, it stems from our entire engagement with the Chinese government, which, as I said, is very opaque, and we may not know. Maybe this is part of the deal, because we have to go back to how they got those permits to trade. Are they illegally here or legally here? And if they're legally here, has somebody given them a permit to hawk?
Yes.
Knowing very well that ordinary Kenyans across the country can do that job without blinking an eye. So I think we need to maintain the picture of the Kenyan people in our consciousness when we're discussing this issue. Yes, there are economic issues, yes, there are legal issues, but the economy is nothing without the people of Kenya, and those are the people who must be protected. I'm not saying that investors and foreigners shouldn't come in, but the government should take very active steps, like it has done with this Investment Act, to make sure that local traders even consumers are protected and local trade is boosted and supported.
Okay, we'll get a reaction from the Ministry of Interior in terms of after seeing that particular story, and you'll tell us your interaction with them as you were doing this particular story in terms of their cooperation and giving you details, because the CS spoke very harsh and said, you know, we won't be given any work permits from here, it has to be acquired from there, and some people will be deported. We'll see if you're happy with that reaction from the government and if you've done any follow-up on it in terms of action actually being taken and not just words being spoken. Stay with Press Pass. We're back in a moment.
We are not issuing work permits to traders because we don't do that as government. We don't have a classification of work permits called traders. And any people who are in markets and so on, who are trying to trade, those are illegal immigrants. They are here illegally. And our security team understands that. We will deport them. The 6 in Nairobi, there were 6. Wale 6 walikuwa Nairobi. Walionekana kwa market huko. Wao by tomorrow watakuwa wanakula sapa kwao because tutawarudisha kwao.
Well, apparently they were meant to be having sushi or something in Beijing or wherever it is that they're from. That is the 6 Chinese that he was making reference to. Edwin, when you heard this, and I remember sending you a screenshot, were you happy talking about impact journalism? Is this what you wanted to, you know, as part of the result?
Yeah, sure. It was a signal that the story moves forward.
Yes.
Which is what every journalist would see.
Want.
So for me, that was story going forward, and that gives me the impetus to push it next to the next level. So I watched that. I was very happy, and I can assure you we are still on it, and we are finding out what's going on.
In the piece that was done by Wahiga Maora on Citizen, it aired last night, the Chinese ambassador, Wu Peng, the new Chinese ambassador, he said he didn't quite get the names from the Kenyan authorities in terms of these illegal Chinese operating here, illegal in terms of immigration status. So is this hot air? Are you still happy when you hear this?
I don't want to say I'm happy or not happy because until it is done.
Yes.
We are not there yet.
Okay.
And as you can tell, if the ambassador says he has not been informed or he has not been engaged on that kind of a process, you know you cannot deport a national without going through their embassy.
Yes.
So that is for sure that we are not there yet, but I think you will need to give me a little bit of more time.
Of course.
Just to be sure that this is where the story moves
And there needs
next.
to be continued pressure on the government and other, national or some of the regulators in terms of pushing it forward. Because this alludes to what you said, Julie, earlier. There's like an unspoken rule or an environment that they're allowed to work in. Because the CS might speak somewhere in the country and say they're going to be deported, they'll be having dinner in China tonight. Mm-hmm. But then there's something that in the background, people don't see this, the agreements that they have, nothing will actually happen. So where does that leave us? Because there's some hopeless sentiments as well saying, what will happen? Even as we talk about this, nothing will happen to the Chinese who are here that you're talking about. And that kind of takes the breath out of our lungs as journalists.
Yeah, I guess you have to make a distinction between illegal and legal immigration. If they're legal immigrants and they somehow have work permits, then that's a whole different issue, even though we don't know the genesis of those work permits. Okay. If they're illegal, it's a whole different story. But what stands out for me is that C.S. Matiang'i is speaking about the 7 people who were seen somewhere as if he doesn't know. Doesn't he know?
This is the Interior Ministry.
Yes, the number of Chinese in this country, whether they have legal status or not, doesn't he have that information? And 7 out of God knows how many. And then his whole roadside declaration kind of tone of they're going to go and eat in Shanghai or wherever just gives you the impression that he was just saying that to kind of appease.
Yeah, because there's also some praise, from the crowd and people talking, saying, hey, yeah, you've taken action.
Yes,
get them back home. Get them back home. Really quick.
But it's not just a roadside declaration, because the next day we got a communique from the Interior Ministry saying that the CS has signed deportation orders. Okay. So for me that was, and I think I wrote a story immediately after that the deportation order has been signed.
So Edwin, I think the next step would be to find out if they have actually been deported and why they were deported.
And I mean, we can go by what the ambassador told the citizen journalist, that nothing has been brought to me in terms of if indeed they signed the deportation papers. That means those communique as well to the embassy.
That's the triangle we have to play around with, because this is the CS Interior.
Yes.
He says those are illegal immigrants and they'll take supper at home. And the next day he signs deportation orders.
Yes.
I mean, so what next? That's the thing.
And that's what we're following up
so
on.
that's the triangle we have to play around until we know who's
You made a smirk or something, a reaction when CS was saying, I don't issue work permits, and you somewhat agreed or you just reacted to that. In terms of this particular story, what should we be following? He says he went to combine other, informal settings, informal business settings, and try to get the presence and establish whether what they have set themselves up as is what they are permitted to do. So that's a tricky place.
Yes. Another point I wanted to make. The question will be what the illegality was. What was the illegality? Because if they came with a work permit, what did the work permit state they're coming to do? If somebody licensed them in the county government to operate a stall, on what grounds did they license them as foreigners? And so the illegality happens on both sides. If somebody gave such a work permit, then that's something that the CS also should take note of, who exactly gave them license.
Okay.
So it's a bigger question. But what I agree with the CS is that a national government at the national level, for somebody who is operating on a stall, national government has little to play about it. And when Julie says here that government actually knows what happens, I think KRA will be the best example. 70% of Kenya's trade and all that happen in the informal sector. And one of the main things that are grappling with is trying to collect taxes from those informal settlements. It's very difficult to understand.
But I think what she says, I mean, we have plainclothes everywhere. And it's hard not to spot a Chinese person in the different streets. I mean, they're not touring Luthuli or River.
That's not one thing that will be careful is not to profile people.
That's the thing.
So that you go around and asking where is your work permit, what do you do, and all those kind of stuff. It's not a good environment.
And we see it happening with the Somali community. And this conversation also came up with people saying, oh, we need to also check the Somali community.
So
they
do
legitimate
biggest problem
business.
with nationalism in terms of economic direction that we are about to set ourselves in. The moment you start profiling Chinese, it moves to the next. It moves to the next. You said go to Somali, you go to Congolese, you go to Rwandese.
I think there's something slightly different to the Chinese because of the nature of our government's relationship with us. And the fact that we don't really know what's going on. We just see things happening. We get loans, we don't know how we're paying them back, we get more loans. We have an SGR, which we don't know how it works. Is it making profit? Is it breaking even? And no one is telling us exactly what those loans are and what the terms are. So that's where our perception starts to go downhill. I'm not saying profile every Chinese person. I'm just saying it's something that people need to look at a bit more close.
Is there a concern from your perspective that from such stories where it's very emotive, and people come out and say, yes, they shouldn't be taking our jobs. In fact, get them out of Luthuli, get them out of Hurlingham. Someone else is saying, let's not just talk about River Road. They're also in Kilimani and Hurlingham, a small Chinatown, people call it right now. Yeah. Is there a concern as you do these stories that it's clear that we're not profiling the Chinese in general?
Sure. We are not profiling. We actually even pointing to the legal aspects of it.
Yes.
And for me, that's where we need to look at. I need to react to Tony's statement that, licensing local traders may not be the business of the national government.
Yes.
But here is the business of the national government. The immigration point, how these people come in, what are they coming to do? So at that point, you're able to tell this is a trader. You heard the CS saying, we don't give permits called traders. So that is so open. I mean, we don't give permits called traders, and here are the traders.
I think that's the point I made. The question will be, what is the illegality? When they come in, the work permit is issued by the Ministry of Immigration. What does the work permit state you're coming to do? So the moment you're found in Gikomba, so they should check what does your work permit read. Right. And so the illegality that the CS should tell us is what exactly happened. He told us he's deporting people, but what is the illegality itself?
And the 6 that he pointed out, I believe it's those who their immigration status doesn't match what they're actually doing on a daily basis here. And some of the things that you've established in your investigations and follow up, right?
Yeah, and of course you understand we could not ask them to show us their work permits because we would have gotten some karate down there.
That's profiling.
But what I'm trying to say is,
yes.
It's at the point of immigration that you determine all these things.
Yes.
These people are coming in. What are they coming to do? So as you heard the CSAs, we don't issue one for traders. So what are the traders doing here? What are they trading in? What is this trade about? And you know the loophole of the 10 million as well, where 3 people can come in, create a small business name, contribute the 10 million, and you realize, I was just reading there's a new investment policy guideline that is coming up. They're trying to segment the places where now must be reserved for Kenyans specifically. So the protectionism and the nationalism thing is still coming up. We have to get a way of, covering up for the small man who has nowhere to, cannot shout, has no voice.
The Wanjiku.
Legally, the Wanjiku as we call them.
Yes.
So that is still coming up. And if you look at the way they give these investment permits and work permits, like if you get an investment certificate, you are allowed to get 3 work permits, management or technical staff. Very specific, management or technical staff. And if you look at all those aspects I'm mentioning, transfer of skills and technology and management and technical, they don't exist in Gikomba. They don't exist in downtown.
Do they exist in Kilimani or Hurlingham?
Probably, yes. I mean, where there are these big structures being built and the housing and the roads, you might find them there.
Yes.
But they don't exist, obviously, in a small stall downtown Nairobi.
Anything wrong with the businesses being set up now in Kilimani and Hurlingham and having a clear presence of the Chinese community? Is there anything wrong if they're doing business clean?
No. There's absolutely nothing wrong if they're doing business clean. My issue is the balance of power and just a level playing field. Are we giving Kenyan citizens the exact same opportunities as the Chinese? If we're not, then it's unfair. It's not nationalism. It's just natural justice and fairness. Okay. Because we have people in Kenya who need to make a living, very many of them, who can't go to China and hawk maize on the roadside, who must make their living here. What are we doing for them? If we're bringing in direct competitors, right from source to wholesale to retail, we are killing their livelihoods, and therefore we're not providing for their family, ensuring that they can provide for their families. Okay. And back to my point, it's all about Kenyans, not Kenya particularly, but Kenyans, people who live here.
Yes.
How are they living and how are they being enabled to live by our government? So this whole issue of balancing the balance of power between us and the Chinese, and the fact that we're not protecting local traders, the lowest rank of local traders, is very worrying going forward.
Should we necessarily, because he's pointed out, and I think he wants to react as well, Tony, when you raise a question about the Chinese, it goes to the Nigerians, and it even came up in the story when Atwoli talked about, oh, you even have African populace here that are also trading in illegitimate business within our borders. And should that be the next story? Do you feel like, now I need to follow up with the Nigerian community, this other community? Is that necessarily the logical trajectory or path that you will follow?
I think this, if you understand the story, the story was titled "The Chinese in Gikomba." We were not meant to just say the Chinese or leave it at that. And this is the beginning of a story, okay? Yes. This is the first of, remember that was the first ever discussion about even the Chinese, wherever, Gikomba or Kamkunji. So for me now the story takes a natural course. I mean, who else? How did they come in? Probably we are sitting on a time bomb that we might, say, oh yeah, they are bringing in money, they are doing all these things. If you watched Wahiga's story, there was someone sending money in a very...
Supposedly with the phone shop.
Yeah, very funny way of doing those things down there. So we probably be sitting in something very bad for our economy, but then we are just saying that we have investors. So I'm not saying I'm itching to find where the Nigerians are. I've not become the immigration bastard in town.
Yes, and clearly you're not trying to spread any hate, and that's been some of the reactions coming your way.
I have lived in other countries as well, and I stuck to my immigration, my visa. If I was a student, I stayed as a student.
No side hustle.
If I was, I didn't start hawking somewhere downtown.
Cross your heart and swear to die.
Tony, there's something here by Black Street, is the name on Twitter. You say, Tony is really supporting the Chinese in Kenyan markets. Edwin has better understanding of what the Wanjiku on the ground is going through. I think the government has a hand in this too. As this story has been told, is it clear, is the message clear that the system is broken, and respond to Black Street?
Yeah. I think my point, I will try to elevate the debate in a different direction. I think the problem is that we are not looking at what's the problem that the government is not handling. It's a broken system. It's not the first time that we've had work permits being given to people who are not doing the kind of trade that we're brought to do. At some point we had a CS giving work permits to a strip club and all such kind of stuff. So it's a broken system, that it's not the Chinese issue. It's a system that is not working in terms of the work permit system and what are the laws that are laid bare, so that what the law says about work permits in Kenya take full effect. So the issue is not about the Chinese itself and what exactly that the problem that we have here today.
Okay.
So my argument would be that we need to look at both sides of government also, that government is also not doing its part in terms of trying to make sure that strict laws, especially we can call them economic immigrants that are coming into Kenya. What are they doing legally and what are they doing that you're able to deter people who are doing illegal business?
And something that needs to be clear as well, you even pointed out a figure there, 60% of the Mitumba business actually is coming in from China and has been there.
2018
something that needs to be cleared, whenever we hear Chinese products, if it was China, people think fake. But that's not necessarily the truth, and we need to clarify that. I mean, the products that come from China are actually good. I'll start with you as we conclude this particular issue and get into that contract that everyone is looking for.
Especially for the Mitumba, they are not fake. Because they were originally made there to be used there. And so they have been used there, and now they have been exported to Kenya.
So it's not at all that even though their goods are cheaper, it's not that they're bringing fake products.
From my own, from what I saw in Gikomba, they're just the shoes, the sport shoes, the used clothes. In fact, the traders were telling us they are smaller and they fit most people because
because of where they're from.
If you buy the ones from Canada, I'm told they are a bit larger, so they are not easy to fit. So these ones fit people. But there's another issue the traders were raising, because goods before they are imported here, they are done. There's something called pre-export verification that is done from the point of origin. So 60% of the Mitumba coming from China, and then the pre-export verification is being done there. And there's an appointed agent who does it there.
Chinese.
Who is a Chinese. Then there's this Kenyan who used to go and import directly from there. And they're now complaining that, you know, when they go and try importing, it takes forever. Because, look, these are competing interests. I'm a Chinese, my fellow nationality, my fellow citizen is also exporting to Kenya. There's this big, small, combined Kenyan traders who are also taking the same goods. So there was that's a claim, but they say there's delay, these others come too fast, and then by the time they arrive here, the market is flooded. They used to take to Kisii. You had that lady from Kisii saying the market there is also taken, Eldoret is taken. I mean, you really need to feel for these people. If you have time, get down to Gikomba and you'll understand that it's not a joke. And we are not competing with an equal here. Remember, this is even our balance of trade with China. I mean, they are 33 times more than, they bring 33 times more than what we take. So we are not competing with equals, and we only need very little ways of trying to see that our people also survive at the end of the day.
Yes. And closing remark on this issue, and then we'll get into...
I don't even know what to add to that, Edwin. What he said. But I think Tony is right. The Chinese are just a symptom of a broken system of immigration, which has been going on for years and years and years. People getting work permits or visas without deserving them, quote unquote, without paying for them or qualifying for them. So I think it's just an issue of microaggressions and death by 1,000 cuts, because many things happen in this country that injure people and cause them to feel like they're strangers in their own land. This is another thing. And unfortunately, this is quite a big thing. So it might be time for the government, and let me not say the government, for Kenyans to figure out how we're going to run this country in a way that...
not take the law into their own hands.
Yes, that we all get along, and not to profile the Chinese at all, but to direct our anger at the correct place, which is squarely with immigration and the people who control the inflow and outflow of people, the people who control trade, and the people who make regulations in this country, because they would not be here otherwise.
Right. Something else that came up, and please make it quick, you made a reaction to that in the story done by Wahiga Maura, the fish from China, and the fish that we get from a lake region. It's cheaper to get it from China than it is to get it from within that region. And is it because it's less quality in terms of, the kind of fish we're having? Sometime back, people were talking about plastic rice, and bad fish coming to our market. Is that the concern? Is that why it's cheaper? Can you explain that?
Okay. There is no concrete, to date, there is no concrete evidence that there was plastic fish or plastic rice. So until that comes up, then you can have that discussion. About the fish issue is that Chinese are able to establish themselves as a fishing export country, and so they do it in scale. In terms, they call it the cage fishing, and so they do it in scale. But the quality is not as different. Is not the same as what we experience from Lake Victoria, and so our quality is a little bit higher.
Yes.
But in terms of mass, it's those heavy fish, and the price is quite low. So logistically, so they're able to bring it back in a very good price, and so they compete with the local one. But the issue is that the local demand for fish is too big that the local people cannot meet. They only meet a third of the demand.
Okay.
So the other 2/3, somebody has to meet it. And that's what the Chinese are coming to play. So those are government structures that need to play out. You look at a sector and you see there's a demand for these, and these people, the local demand is this, and what is the outside players, not specifically Chinese, but outside players. We also import from Uganda and other places.
Okay.
What other people can play in terms of imports? And so I think the biggest problem that we're having here is lack of direction by the government itself on trying to have a conversation on what the role of Chinese investors here in Kenya and the Kenyans can play. So that's the biggest disconnect that we have.
Okay, but it's very clear that we're not profiling the Chinese or any other community, and that's clear from Edwin's perspective. He will continue reporting on this. It's just the beginning of the story, as he says. And Julie, you mentioned something about the mistrust with the SGR deal and what have you. Well, the CS Transport, James Macharia, he actually said that they shared that contract with one of the media houses. Yes, this is Nation Media Group, but perhaps Edwin was given by Macharia and he didn't share it. We'll hear the response from that when we get back. Stay with Press Pass. as the conversation has been going on, the hashtag PressPass, and people have been contributing to this conversation. Keep it going. Starving artists, you say, true, the root cause of the problem is a broken system. We give permits to Chinese to troll our deep seas and they supply us with cheap fish. Well, I'm not too sure that's a version that Tony told us about. It's actually real fish or good fish. It's just that the scale at which they're working with allows them to bring it at a cheaper rate, perhaps something that we should get into further, not just to tag anything Chinese as fake. Most of the products that we have, even this MacBook Air that's quite nice, I can say for myself, and was quite expensive, was made in China. And it's serving me well. So we should be able to get it straight. Keep the conversation going. Now, on 8th of May this year, the CS for Transport, James Macharia, was asked by NTV Business journalist Alex Mwangi about the follow-up on the SGR contract that they were to share with the newsrooms. And it didn't quite come out as a straight answer, but this is what he said. And let's listen in.
Yes, Masharia, maybe the Kenyans are concerned whether about the contract between Kenya and China on the SGR and whether there are strategic assets for the country that were attached to that contract. Is it possible to make it public?
Well, I think we actually did, share with it with some, I can't remember who was there, but we did share with some media houses. This is a matter of fact, we did. But let me also say that you don't have to read that contract. It is a standard contract. In terms of what you can get if you sign with any other counterparty, that standard, that contract is not out of the ordinary. I can assure you, it is just within the normal international, standards and requirements for international contracts. It is standard, and that's all I can say as of now, because it's a big contract, which giving it out, yes, we shared it out, but it contains the standard clauses for any such, contract which involves key parties.
I would have played that back, but because I wasn't too sure I understood what he said. But Edwin Okoth, you were there for that press briefing. You were amongst the journalists there. Perhaps I didn't hear him right. Maybe you understood him better when he said this. Do you believe what he says?
I actually heard him when I was there, but now I understand him when you play. He's saying you don't have to read it.
Okay.
And it's just a standard contract, and there's nothing out of ordinary. That is May 2019, right?
Yeah.
That's over a year. No, it's
Actually,
just 5 months after we reported on that contract. We reported on it in January 13th.
Yes, yes.
So he says we don't have to read it. I read it. I read the whole of it. And there's so much that is not standard, and we highlighted that in our story. So it's hard to contain that statement. It's so painful to hear him say that you don't have to read it, and it's just a normal. It's us who are paying for that loan. Why does it get to a level where we don't have to read it? It's like lending you at the bank, and then there are so many terms and conditions, and you are told you don't have to read it, just sign.
Just sign.
And then you realize that you have signed your death sentence.
Right.
So it's shocking. I don't know.
And it wasn't the Nation Media Group that he shared this with. I mean, he speaks of some media house.
He doesn't remember who was there, so I'm not sure. Also
I mean, sharing the SGR contract, you need to know. You probably need to have a contract to hand over a contract just to follow up on who has it in particular. But yes, these are stories that you've done, and I'm sure we'll keep getting that from the Daily Nation team, the Sunday Nation team, the Business Daily team. Julie, I want to hear your sentiments when you hear this go on. The mistrust definitely continues.
Yeah, it does, right from the top, which is why people who encounter problems on the ground are very angry, because these are the kind of responses that you get from the leadership. You don't have to read the contract, it's a standard contract. Kind of like a flippant attitude about the whole thing, whereas he should be walking people through that contract clause by clause to explain what's happening, how much money it was, what the conditions were, did it include immigration of how many, whatever number of Chinese people. All those things should be disclosed to the public, but they are not at that level. And then at the practical level, people are interacting on the ground and trading with Chinese nationals or whatever it is they're doing with any other national. They encounter problems which do not match up with the narrative from the top. So this is why the whole story of perception is so strong, because we're not getting the answers, and yet we can see things going wrong.
Right.
So I know I blame the government and our parenting authority, as my friend Clay Uganda calls it, a lot, but really this problem can be solved if they just told us what was happening.
Yes.
However bad or good it is.
As an economist, Soni Watima, what would you really want to get your hands on in terms of this particular contract? There's one thing, getting it and digesting it for Kenyans, not saying that they're not able to do it themselves. Many are. In fact, even explain it to us. But as an economist, what are you really keen on?
I think the main thing for any economist will be that what is the economic viability of that project? The financial bit of it, the economic part of it.
Initially, when he said, he mentioned July that he said we'd break even?
July 2018.
2018,
yeah.
which is
a year
later after the launch.
So those are the details.
Did you buy that?
No. For such a huge investment, mega infrastructure project, you don't break even that easily.
Yes.
And the biggest issue is that not even about breaking even, is about what kind of a risk did Kenyan government take, which is the taxpayer who takes that risk, and what are the risks that the Chinese took. So what was the share of that risk? Did we take too much risk for that project, and is it worth it as an economic project? We've been given figures around, but we are able not to verify if we don't see the contract itself. So those are the main things that we look at: the economic viability, financial, environmental, and all the other things, and the risks that Kenyan government took. Because we've heard there was a sovereign immunity being lifted on specific assets in Kenya. Those are the risks that we're talking about. What are the kind of the terms that we're given in this thing? Those are the risks that we're talking about. But since when you hear the CS talks about, and this is the tragedy about this government, is that we put a very good constitution about opaqueness, about transparency, about engaging in public participation and kind of a thing. But what I wonder is that when guys in government and heading dockets seem not to understand or read from the same constitution that every one of us reads from.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's really quick comment on this as we close on this matter, because we need to get to what Uhuru said yesterday, and this is now off business and into politics. I know it's not your desk, but you definitely have something to say about that. When the CS talks about this particular contract either going out or not, there's the question about, is there something that they're definitely going to be hiding that the Kenyans should not see?
I think that's the correct thing to see, because when you look at somebody tells, I gave out the contract, who I don't know, but you should not read it. It tells you that there's something that is there that you should not read it, in fact.
Okay.
There's something wrong in that contract. And that's the biggest tragedy that we have, that people think that for the short term, they might hide that contract, but this is a long-term thing. This project will be there forever.
Yes.
Even after this government, those are the questions that will remain forever, and somebody has to answer.
Okay.
And so it's a bigger conversation that is not going anytime soon.
All right, real quick.
Yeah, real quick. Out of the fact that the CS says this is not it's not extraordinary. That's, if I interpret what he's saying, I can lightly say that if you want to know it has extraordinary clauses, you need to ask Magufuli, the president of Tanzania,
Yes.
if you saw his rant about a port being
Mm-hmm.
built and then very crazy terms being put in there. So even the coming to the opaqueness, there's so much to hide, and that's why there's a clause in the contract that says it cannot be disclosed. Look at the figures we've got for revenues for the freight business. We got 10.3 billion 2018, and then come the leading economic indicators for March. The Kenya National Bureau of Statistics now says 5.7 billion suddenly.
Yes.
I even talked to the director, asked him, so what's going on? He said, we got the figures from Kenya Railways, and we are also asking them, where did it come from? Now, for a project of that magnitude, when you cut 4 billion out of it suddenly like that, that's where the problem is. I mean, there's a quote I wrote in my last story about the operational contract, which I got from a professor in Colombia. He's called Professor Howard French. He has written a lot about China, Africa. He says opaque contracts never yield transparent results.
Exactly.
There's nothing good in an opaque contract. Why is it opaque in the first place?
Yeah.
That's the thing. You don't expect something done in darkness and kept there to yield nice things in light.
In any way, can we say in their defense, the Chinese actually put a clause there that, no disclosure, non-disclosure. They're doing business that the Kenyan government signed to.
For sure, I agree with you.
Yes.
I agree with you, because we don't expect the Chinese to negotiate for us.
Yeah, they're doing it for themselves.
When we get to the table, it's us and them.
Yes,
then
and the government is representing us.
How do we? So we've been let down by the people who went to that table.
Okay. Yes.
Is the government representing us really? Yeah. Or is the government representing itself? But either way, I think from the beginning, the standard gauge railway was more expensive than it ever should have been. There was the proposal to upgrade it's called the single gauge, the old railway, the Lunatic Express. Yeah. They dismissed that out of hand.
Then what Uganda has gone for.
Yes, yeah. But now they're bringing it up again because they don't have any more money to take the railway to Malaba, I think. So the whole nature of how it was done was wrong. It's fruit of a poisonous tree right from the beginning.
Okay.
So it's no surprise that we're now being told there are clauses that we cannot see, because everything looked shifty from the get-go. So now we have to live with this railway elephant. Go ahead.
There's one point that you asked about Chinese opaqueness. I think one of the main things that China-Africa relations that everyone is talking about and the critique about it is that China has been opaque in its business, especially government-to-government business in Africa.
Yes.
It's not a Kenyan thing, it's an African thing. And you look at the standards of investments internationally, you look at World Bank, you look at IMF, and bigger players within that sector. One of the main things about transparency that you're able to buy public confidence in projects. And one of the main things that Chinese has not complied to in those standards is opaqueness and confidentiality of projects when they're coming into the taxpayers' docket. So that's the biggest problem, that it's not a Kenyan problem, but the problem with the Africa and China relations is about opaqueness on government contracts. And it's something that they may not work around it today, but it's hurting their interest in Africa.
Well, Magufuli seems to have learned the lesson.
Quick one. I have a lot to talk about this loan, so forgive me for adding too many things. But you know, when countries sign deals, then it's a partnership, okay? So speaking about Africa, African leaders are happy about this no strings attached kind of carrot being dangled on them. But the question is that a good partner, the one who does not attach strings? Go down to Kimathi Street tomorrow morning, Mark, carry 10,000 and stop anyone and tell them, I'm going to lend you 10,000. I don't know where you work. I don't care whether you'll return it. I don't care where you're putting it, but I'm just lending it. And then watch their reaction. I don't think they're happy to pick it.
They're going to raise the money and see if it's legitimate, or think that I'm dumping off the old notes to them in exchange.
So a good partner must be concerned.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. And this is something that, a conversation that definitely continues. Questions that will remain until we get that particular contract and even details out from it. And I believe we can expect that from the team here from Nation Media Group, with Edwin being one of the team members there. Now, something besides the business, into politics, and it's just for comment, but we have to get this out there. President Uhuru Kenyatta, he sighs as I'm going into politics. President Uhuru Kenyatta, in a raw expression of anger, once again hit out at politicians, especially those from his central Kenya backyard, engaged in 2022 election campaign, saying he will not sit by as they undermined his leadership. And this is what part of what he said yesterday at a gathering at Kasarani.
Omothe nä nguga na ndaria na ruga itå na no gå thiårå gwitå na nä ngwä ra andå mä kora ä no tå thurä te tå reta ciaca matigecirie niä ndä kä hä kä ao matigecirie niä ndä kä hä nä twaigua na matikå ndå gamia barabara ä rä a ndä thondekeire ä rä a ndä renda gå kinya na kå rä a ndä renda gå twara andå aitå na kå rä a ndä renda kå makinyia gä kä gä tige gå tinda gä kä ngia gå kå makä ä nä twaiguithania tondå manyonaga ngirä te å guo mageciria nä kuga ndå igire ndirenda ciaca ä nä må ranjigua må ndå agä korwo wä mwecimua coka gä cagi gwaku wake cukuru wä kä rä re andå thitima na mbeca iria hetwo tiga gå kå gå thiå rå ka å gä twä raga å rä a å kaneneha gå tirä kå ndå å gathiä å tarä na andå aya å mere wa njomo no we rå gamä rä ire na nä arå gamä rä ire bå rå ri na gå tirä na kä ndå gä a kå makia må ndå.
So anyway, if it wasn't for the translation, I would have been lost there. And I believe some will correct us with the errand boy translation, but it's words that I can't repeat here. But quick reactions. We'll have this discussion on Sidebar definitely tomorrow. So you have this particular headline by The Standard. Angry Uhuru warning to Ruto team. And another one, Furious Uhuru. This is from the Daily Nation. Furious Uhuru breaks ranks with rebel MPs. Do we exaggerate some of these roadside declarations or spats that we have from the politicians? I'll start with Julie. You seem like you're about to tear in rage or something, or laughter, I don't know. But I'll start with you. We're just giving quick reactions to this in the role that we play in putting this out there.
I think we do on normal days, but I don't think that was a normal day.
Right.
I mean, the president was visibly angry, as he is very often, making unspecified threats, seeming very emotional, if I might say. So I think that was newsworthy to hear what he was saying. Unfortunately, he was saying much of the same. Trying to restate that he's the president. We all know that. If you have to restate that so many times, then that kind of calls into question if you really think you're the president.
Right.
But, and then the tone of voice and the anger and the lashing out and the threats, we're used to seeing that. What I'd be interested to know is what's going to happen next. And I'm willing to bet that it'll be a while before we see what's going to happen. An interesting thing was Ruto's response, because he stood up and said, Mr. President, you've made me the man I am today, and I'm going to work to fulfill our agenda. And it was very interesting to me for him to say that he's the man he is today, thanks to the president, because the implications of that are very broad.
Right.
What kind of man is he? But I think generally, with the whole 2022 coverage, which started in 2017, we've taken it overboard. Every single day is 2022.
And you also told me that you switched off a while back.
I completely switched off. I watched this because you asked me to.
Yes, and with the tone that we take it, or the interpretation, Angry Uhuru warning to Ruto team, and I believe even this one, if you read further, it will go into the directing this to Ruto. Are we, causing a fight or divide that's not necessarily there, in your view?
First, I would say, from the body language and from what he said, even the way he chose to use mother tongue, it's enough that was enough signal that he was not happy.
Yes.
And for me, that is for the first time he speaks for me, because I also feel depressed when every day we wake up, it's politics, tanga kitaeleweka, kimeeleweka, kieleweke, all the time. It's annoying, because at some point we need to get to, do some work. And he told them to go back to their constituencies and build schools and build toilets and build and connect them to electricity. So for me, at some point, we need to get down to work. But this is too much. I mean, it's depressing to just see politics today and politics tomorrow and 5 years. Yeah, I wish I could talk like him in another form.
Well, I mean, we can't quite repeat some of the words, and we can't say it here on air. I'll be in trouble. Watima, any responsibility on our part? And this makes for great TV and even, good sales of our paper, because you can expect this to be the story of the week, the response from the Ruto team, and back and forth and back and forth. Anything wrong with that?
I don't think there is nothing wrong with reporting such a kind of a thing, because you look at, he's trying to say that we should not engage in politics, but what exactly he's doing is engaging in politics itself. So there's a right of reply for everyone who thinks that the message was for him. Yes. And so it's a serial thing that you're trying to create, and so there's a cycle about it. So it's something that media, of course, will report, because you look at the expression, everything that he was doing, the body language and everything, you can tell that somebody is hungry here, and so you need to report something.
Yes.
So, but you expect that a right of reply will come from somewhere. So
exactly.
The chain of events take effect immediately. But the last thing is that Chinua Achebe has a saying that, if I paraphrase, that a tiger does not go around announcing its tigritude, it pounces.
Yes.
So if you're a leader and you announce that I'm the president, it might mean on the contrary, because everyone knows that fact.
Right.
But when you try to say it out, there's a problem somewhere that you're trying to cover.
Right. Okay. You've made the comment on that. I'd like us to move to the other issue, and that is a story that's also caught a lot of our attention in terms of our newsrooms, and this is on the twins. And I believe we've all heard it, whether you're in business news, whether you're in sports news, we've all followed it because it's quite something. They met, or at least they found each other on social media and found out that they're actually twin sisters. The families of twins separated at birth now say they've forgiven the hospital responsible for the mix-up that saw the two girls raised by separate families, Melvis, Melon, and Sharon. Actually, Melvis was found not to be related to the two, that is Melon and Sharon, the identical twins, but they say they have accepted the results and will not be going their separate ways. And they spoke at the tail end of a months-long process to find out the truth about their paternity. Let's find out a bit of what they had to say earlier.
Way forward.
I have accepted the DNA results the way they have appeared. And what I want to say to the world that let this story of ours be a lesson to all the parents, because we don't know how many parents are living with children who are not theirs.
Tuishi pamoja, tusikuje tukatengana, tukae as a family.
We definitely wish them all the best as they surge forward as a family. And she said that, Sharon said, let this story be a lesson to other parents. Can this story and how it was told be a lesson to media houses and how we handled it? Perhaps you probably switched off at some point from media houses and news, but you've probably seen how we've covered this.
Yeah.
Are you, from a journalistic point of view, from a humane point of view, from a lawyer's point of view, okay with how this was handled?
I thought the story is... I liked the story.
Yes.
It's heartwarming in the end, but I thought the packaging of it could have been different. It's a perfect human interest story that would tug at people's hearts, like packaged as a feature, not as part of the news. If we went back to the hospital in Kakamega and said this is where they were born and showed the babies, went to their houses and did like an all-rounded story about these girls and their mothers. Because during that press conference, you could see one of the women didn't seem to be very happy. Yes. Why was she not happy? The girls seem to have made up what's their relationship like. When they go to school, they're doing their Form 4. Give a broader picture of who they are from a human interest perspective. I think what struck people the most, because it was a news story in the beginning, I believe, that they look alike and what's the results of their DNA, and then the story went dead. I think it wasn't until social media started rumbling about what happened to those girls that it was picked up again. But more should have been done to go more in depth and just tell a really nice story like you see on CNN or BBC or wherever, even locally in Kenya, a feature story that really gives you all the answers you want all at once.
Right.
Less of the spokesman that I saw there and more of their own voices. Okay. And perhaps not in a setting that is very press conference-y.
Yes, there's pressure.
Yes, just in like a home setting, a day in the life type vibe.
Right.
But other than that, I thought it was an interesting story. But there was too much, they were really exposed to the spotlight harshly, like 1 minute they were not, the next minute they were, everybody knew who they were, and maybe they were not prepared for that exposure. Yeah. So I don't know how far we can go as journalists to explain to people that once your story is out there, your story is out there. Yeah. People are going to know who you are. Prepare them. Get their full consent on all the issues. This is what's likely to happen. Do you agree to this if it happens? Yeah. Take into consideration their age. If they're young girls, they might not even understand what you're telling them. So how do you communicate with them? And also, is it in the public interest? Do we need to know that these twins were separated at birth?
Yes.
And if so, how can we make it into a story that appeals? And like she says, is a lesson to parents, or hospitals. Because what happened at the hospital? Yeah. How did that happen?
That's actually another bigger story that people say. It doesn't die there. Yeah. It's probably a bigger story to tell in this particular incident. I'm not expecting you to be following this up. You're busy with the SGR contract.
Markla is very sexist. Yeah. Please retract
No, I'm just saying he is from the business desk. He's a business journalist, but he's still a human being who has interest in such a story. In your view, what's the next thing? Does it end here?
No, it doesn't end here, and I agree with her that putting them so much in the limelight might not be the best idea.
Yeah.
But now going forward is back to the hospitals, not just the hospital where they were born, but other hospitals. What happens if that babies get exchanged?
Yes.
And I really feel for them when they say, some parents could be living with children who are not their own. And so maybe, Mark, you were born to stay in the US and you're here in
Apambana na hali yangu hapa Kenya.
Because things happen when you were born. Or you live in Runda and you're supposed to be in Kibera. And
that's good fortune.
So those things happen. But that is sad. That is sad. And I think that's the next level of taking it to the hospitals and finding out. the more we report about it, probably they'll reform and make sure those things never happen again.
Yes. Something just crossed my mind because most women believe that your baby is your baby. Because you know you pushed it out or it was taken out, whatever, you just feel that this is my baby.
Yeah.
In that case, it wasn't, you know. So what about that whole emotional, mental thing they have to go through? You've been raising this child as your own for all these years.
Yes.
And then it turns out that it's not yours.
Yeah. So there's many angles to it that we need to continue pursuing, but there's very little that we can do in terms of controlling the life it takes in social media. You know the jokes that come on, and especially after this broke, the jokes that come out. That's really not our place, but there's what we can control as the newsroom and journalists.
That's a tough
just from your no. You just agree with it, but then from your view as an audience, I mean, you're an economist as well. I mean, your focus is different, but this touches anyone from wherever you get this story.
There is little that you can control out there. Information is not something you control. So
but from the holistic picture, how the story was told.
I agree with everything that Julia said. The story is nice. It's a very nice story. But the packaging itself.
Yes.
I think they expose these young girls to the media limelight, and I'm not sure how they will handle it after. And you know, the backlash that comes with media limelight, I think that's one of the biggest problems that they will need to handle, especially with the kind of story that has been brought up around them. The backlash itself on how people respond, not every people respond positively, but the people respond negatively. So at that age that they're in, how do you handle that issue? But the other issue would be, is it a systemic problem or are you experiencing?
Yes.
But that would be the question for journalists. So is it a systemic problem? If it's a systemic problem, that what are the kind of laws that we have that are able to curb such a kind of a thing?
Okay. And just a quick comment. You know, when Julie says, oh, we've started 2022 politics in 2017, former president once said, I used to say, siasa mbaya, maisha mbaya.
Yes.
Can that be the understanding here? That politics will rule the day because bad politics means bad business or bad life?
I don't think so. And I made this point the last time I was at Press Pass. How we govern ourselves, and that's where politics come in, the polity itself. So as a group, how we govern ourselves, that is politics. Determines the kind of development and economic interest we are going at.
It's not the rallies and
so even in terms of how Parliament accesses funds and does allocation, it's a political process. There is no way you can avoid politics if you're talking about development.
Siasa mbaya, maisha mbaya?
Yes, but what is politics? Is what we are doing politics?
True.
It doesn't seem like any kind of governance. It seems like purely a power play.
Yes.
You know, with eyes on the prize.
Okay.
So if we move to his definition of governance, then we can talk about politics every day 24/7 because we're trying to figure out how to self-govern and be governed better. But if we're hurling insults and tanka-tankaing or whatever you were saying, kileweke, that, then that's purely a waste of time, an absolute waste of time.
Eric, I mean, Edwin, you've traveled, and I'm not bragging on your behalf, but you've traveled, and you've seen it. I mean, politics as well takes, like in the UK, it takes over, and that's covered fully. So is it fair that we get that, critique that too much siasa in your media?
Yeah, of course there's too much siasa, and I don't know whether it's everything we do that is politics or we just have to report it all the time. I don't know. I don't report politics.
Yes, I know.
But it's sad that we have to do politics all the time with everything and every issue, including the new currency.
Politicized.
Like anything that comes out, we just have to politicize it, fight against corruption, projects, roads, anything, church,
Huduma number.
Name it, anything becomes politics. That's the saddest bit of it.
Right.
And it's depressing. I mean, if you, I would one day speak in my mother tongue.
Well, let's not break into vernacular. But thank you, Edwin, of course, for your thoughts. And you can find more of his work. Of course, you can follow him on Twitter and definitely get his work on Business Daily, on the Daily Nation, on a weekly basis. He's on that. And on Tuesdays, Julie, you have a column on the Standard newspaper.
Yes.
Someone was asking, they've missed seeing you on KTN. They're asking what happened there. But yes.
Chinese, man.
The Chinese took over. And then you can find as well contributions as the commissioning editor at The Conversation, Global Perspectives, Academic Rigor, Journalistic Flair. You can visit that website. just to follow up on what they do. This is conversations on the continent, internationally, well thought out articles. Yes, Tony Watima, you can follow him as well on Twitter. Find his column every Tuesday on the Business Daily. So expecting something tomorrow on the Business Daily. And yes, you can find me back here on Press Pass next Monday. But yes, I'll be on air tomorrow in terms of reportage. And something that we need to look at, and this is because there's been a lot of talk, even internally, about the job security in the media sector in Kenya and even here at the Nation Media Group. There's a lot of rumors going around, and I can be honest that it is unsettling. Well, something internationally happening. The film and television industry has launched its largest ever survey into the mental health and well-being of its workforce. The industry marks the first phase of the Looking Glass study, led by the film and television charity, following 2,000 calls to its industry support line. The findings will be used to assess the comparative prevalence of mental health problems within the industry, the perceived barriers to support, and recommend potential solutions. An unprecedented period of destabilization within the media industry has created a freelance working culture, diminishing job security and statutory rights for workers in the sector. Last year, a survey from the Sutton Trust, a body that campaigns for social mobility, found most internships in retailing, the arts and the media are unpaid. The recently piloted support line provides free and confidential advice for film and television professionals on issues such as debt, depression and harassment. According to freelancers who have sought to remain anonymous and who have taken part in the survey, state that they have not had a holiday for years. All of the supposed benefits of being a freelance, such as flexible working hours and varied roles, are rarely exploited due to the worry of not getting another job. The survey will run until July and the results released thereafter. And BBC, STV Channel 4 and Animal Shine Group and Sign World Cinemas are among the media companies who will work on the findings. Something we should probably consider here at the Nation Media Group, given the times and what's happening. And you've heard Edwin himself say it's depressing seeing some of these stories. And imagine if it's depressing for you to hear these stories, imagine what it is, how it is for us to put it together and present it. We probably need a lot of attention in terms of mental health and the talk about job security that we're having around town. My job here is done for the night. Thank you for watching. Thank you on behalf of the team that made this possible, those who are in the behind the scenes who you don't get to see, and my panelists again for the long hours that you've taken just to be here with us. And Julie, please switch us back on. It might be worth your while. Thank you for watching Press Pass. My name is Mark Masai. Good night.